Hi everyone, and welcome to the Fake Love and Flying Monkeys podcast. My name's Nova Gibson and I am your host. My area of expertise is in supporting victims and survivors of narcissistic abuse and other toxic relationships. I'm the principal counsellor at Brighter Outlook Narcissistic Abuse Counselling Service, and I'm also the author of Fake Love, Understanding and Healing from Narcissistic Abuse. In this podcast, we're going to be talking about everything from the initial pink cloud you find yourself on at the start through to the horrific discard and the powerful trauma bond that keeps you hooked. So take your imaginary seat on the roller coaster that is narcissistic abuse, and don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode of Fake Love and Flying Monkeys. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Fake Love and Flying Monkeys. I have another very, very special guest with me today, and her name is Karin Walker. Now, Karin Walker is a solicitor and a mediator and a collaborative practitioner, a neutral evaluator, and an arbitrator. She founded KGW Family Law based in Woking, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Woking, Surrey, in January 2012. This is a niche family law practice whose ethos is a commitment to resolving issues between separating couples through constructive communication. Karin is also, though, a published author, having written Do It Out of Court, a practical guide to dispute resolution processes in family law, and a practical guide to divorce for the silver separators, published by Law Brief Publishing. She's also the co-author of, this is what I love about Karin, Narcissism and Family Law, Practitioner's Guide, and Divorcing a Narcissist, The Lure, The Loss, and the Law, published by Bath Publishing. And now you can see why I was so wanting to get Karin on as a guest, because it is so important to find the right lawyer when you are coming up against a narcissist in court. So welcome, Karin. Thank you so much for joining me here today.
Novus, thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm really looking forward to talking to you today.
My absolute pleasure. I'm really excited to have you here because, Karin, when people come to see me, I'm a counsellor who deals specifically with victims and survivors of narcissistic abuse. That's all I do now. And of course, I'm an author too. But when they come to see me and they're rock bottom, I mean, they've possibly been discarded by their abuser or they've managed to escape. But if they've got children, they are facing an appearance at the very least in the family law court. And so much of the time they fear this and they don't want to go there because, they just want it to all be over. And I say to my clients, look, I know you are rock bottom. I know that you don't have the energy to get out of bed sometimes, but you need to do this yesterday. You need to contact a lawyer because you can bet your bottom dollar that your abuser is getting all of their ducks in a row. So, Karin, tell us about your clients and just a little bit about your practice and how you support your clients who are going through this.
Okay, so I think, first of all, it's even more important than finding a lawyer to find somebody like yourself that can get you ready and into the position emotionally to properly recognise what it is that you've been facing, to understand the sort of relationship that you've been in, and the reality of that relationship. I mean, your book, Fake Love, is just brilliant because it deals with that point about this wasn't real. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, that it might become bad, but they need to understand that it really was never real at all. So they need to get themselves sorted out in the first instance. And I think finding someone that can support you and help you to properly understand what you've experienced and what you've been going through is absolutely vital. It's like a light bulb goes on to realize, actually, I now know what it is I was dealing with, why it was so hard to leave this relationship. Because people who've been in an abusive relationship will often take 3, 4, 5, 6 attempts to leave because they're constantly being hoovered back in. Yes. So I think that's the first point I would make. It's really important when you're separating from somebody abusive to find somebody that can support you therapeutically through that, which of course a lawyer can't do. We're not qualified to do that. But I would agree that the next step is to find that legal support, somebody who is able to navigate their way through a very strategically difficult situation. Yeah. Because I think one of the first important points is that you need to instruct somebody that recognizes the behavior pattern and doesn't just kind of fob this off as just difficult or awkward. Because I think there's a danger that narcissism has become a bit of a buzzword over the last 3 or 4 years.
Yes.
And, we're not assisted by politicians, certainly in the Western world, who fit into that description. And so it's become a generic term for anybody who's nasty or vicious or vindictive, and sometimes people are just plain nasty. They don't have to be narcissistic. Yeah. Narcissism follows a very specific behavior pattern. And once you understand that behavior pattern, you will recognize and understand who it is you're dealing with on the other side. Yes. And that's so important, because actually if you don't have that understanding, there's a real danger that lawyers on both sides can actually become weaponized and become extensions of this abusive behavior ongoing. Yes. Narcissists love chaos and drama. So if they lose their significant other in the relationship, they won't like it. They will fight to regain the relationship to start with. So they'll be love bombing like mad and trying to convince the other person that they're losing something fantastic. It's all a big mistake. They've lost the plot. All of that kind of stuff to try and pull them back in. But if they're supported by someone who makes them strong enough to say, no, I'm not putting up with this anymore, then they'll turn into the other, or they'll look for the other source of narcissistic supply, which is to regain control, keep control, create chaos, create drama, be pulling the strings, racking up cost, no outcome, no resolution, just continuing this sort of spiral of difficulty and, again, another form of traumatic abuse.
Yeah, the post-separation abuse, isn't it? Litigation abuse. Just and that, I guess, Karin, that's another indication of who you're dealing with, is that if normal people don't flip from let's sort all this out, I love you so much, to, oh, that didn't work, well, I'm going to make your life a misery. You can leave me, but you'll leave with nothing. People who love you don't flip like that. People who manipulate you flip like that. Yeah,
exactly. And that's one of the red flags really to look out for, that this ability in a heartbeat to just flip from one to the other and turn from your soulmate to your absolute persecutor, with nothing, no grey area in the middle. It's literally a move straight from one to the other. The important key factors, I think, to look out for when you're dealing with somebody narcissistic in the court arena is they have no boundaries. Rules don't apply to them, so they won't listen to anybody. I think that clients often have this idea, when you come out of a traumatic relationship, you have an overwhelming desire for justice and fairness. Yeah. And you want everything to be put right, and you want somebody to listen to you, and you want somebody to do something about this. Yeah. And it's very common to try to turn to the court and have an expectation that a judge or somebody similar is going to make this person behave in a particular way. And of course they won't and they can't.
Yeah.
And so having that understanding that they won't change, they're never going to change. The only thing that you can change is your reaction to them. Again, why it's so important to have therapeutic support, because it's all about you changing. It's changing your reactions. It's becoming a different person, not that compliant, frightened, timid, accepting individual that you probably were throughout the relationship. You've got to gain strength and recognize what you're entitled to, and also think about how you might achieve it, because you're not going to achieve it in the way that you would in a non-abusive relationship. It's a bit like playing a game of chess. You've got to stay 3 or 4 steps ahead.
Absolutely.
You've got to recognize this desire to win. They have to win. And so if you're going to settle out of court, first of all, you have to make all of your negotiation all about the narcissist, because they're only going to listen if it's about them.
Yeah.
If you say, my client wants, my client needs, my client thinks, they're not interested in any of that. All you're doing by saying, my client wants this, that, and the other, is identifying to the narcissist what they're going to make absolutely sure your client doesn't get.
Yeah.
And so in a way, it's like gifting them an opportunity to continue the abuse. So you have to steer away from that and focus on what the narcissist might want, what might be attractive to them. And it sounds really counterintuitive.
Look, I tell my clients, and I'm pretty sure I really reiterate this in Fake Love, Karin, that what you're going to have to do to gather evidence and to protect yourself is often going to go against who you are. It's going to fly in the face of your integrity, in that you might be lying to them because you can't ask nicely. This is when they've got something you want. You can't just ask nicely or you give them a weapon to use, because then you're telling them what's important to you. So a narcissist is going to go, thank you for the heads up. Now I know what not to give you. So yeah, it's about manipulating them into thinking they're having a win. So, but what do you do, Karin, if the narcissist is their win is staying inside your head, and they just want to keep it going forever and ever, and they just keep using delay tactics and not providing information? What do you do when they're doing that? And of course the client, who the victim, who just wants it to all be over, is just kept in this cycle they can't get out of with this post-separation. How do you weave that minefield?
Okay, so the lawyer has to stay really focused on the process and getting from A to B in the shortest, most cost-efficient way that they can. Yeah. The client has to put on the face that they don't care what the narcissist does. They don't care if this is going to take forever. They don't care if they're not going to provide information. Yeah. The lawyer can deal with that. But what the narcissist wants to do is be back in the driving seat, yeah. frighten their spouse or partner into really just walking away from their financial entitlement. That's what their objective is. The lawyer has to make sure that that's not going to happen, and have the right techniques in place to look at how that can best be achieved. Yeah. Court isn't always the best place to be at all, certainly not in this country at the moment, unfortunately. It's so delay-ridden. But there are other processes that you can use, all of which are voluntary. And so it's about selling those processes to the narcissist, encouraging them to think that it's for their benefit, it's going to be better for them, it's going to be ideally suited to them. It appeals to their sense of specialness, that this is something that only that the smart guys do, or the intelligent people do. making them feel that they're in the sort of select element of society by taking this route will appeal to them. But from your client's point of view, they need to really maintain that grey rock position. Never rise to any provocation. Don't allow themselves to become heightened by any unfairness, or to retaliate, or to react. They just have to keep a real lid on any kind of reaction at all, and allow their legal advisor to just help them through the process. As I say, it's a bit like playing a game of chess, and you have to think ahead all the time. Also, in terms of outcome, there's a balance between getting the very best outcome that you can achieve and getting your life back a little bit earlier. Legal fees are never reimbursed, unfortunately. Nobody has a bank account marked divorce costs, so it's dead money. And you've got to always evaluate, okay, if I've got to spend X £1,000 to recover Y £1,000, is it worth it? Or is there a point where I can just say, yeah, I'm going to take this. That's going to give me the ability to rebuild my life, and I don't care about anything else.
Way up the cost, the likelihood of an outcome versus, I guess, the stress, the ongoing stress in your life. So, Karin, in the UK, are you saying that there is no chance of getting costs awarded to you if it's obvious that it's just deliberate litigation abuse?
It's very difficult. I think that, first of all, the basic rule in the UK is that everybody pays their own costs, no matter what. And that can be quite difficult in some circumstances. Because, of course, if your abuser has control of the purse strings, that may put you in quite a difficult place. You can apply a legal services payment order, which allows you to recover the facility to pay your costs from the person who's holding the money. But that's used sometimes, perhaps not as often as it might be, but your basic expectation is that everybody pays their own costs. If somebody behaves very badly, so they don't provide documents on time, or the process is delayed because someone hasn't done something that they should, you can get small costs orders in connection with little bits of work where somebody's failed to provide bank statements or company accounts or something like that. But by and large, everybody's going to pay their own costs. And so that has to be a factor in how you approach the process.
And this is why I'm so glad that I've got you here today, because I have followers in many followers in the UK, and I also have lots of followers in the US, and everywhere's different. So just speaking to quite a few of my Australian clients, obviously I'm not a lawyer, and my first thing I say to them off the bat is, I can't give you legal advice, you need a lawyer. But what they tell me is when there's financial abuse, and which is nearly always, because financial abuse and narcissistic abuse go hand in hand, because the narcissist wants to be in control, then a lot of the time the family law court wants there to be an even playing field. So it's not fair that the abuser, who's controlled all the money and kept it from them, is able to get, $100,000 a day barrister and the best legal team, and the person, because of their abuse, has no access to their own money. Then the lawyers will, ask their abusers' lawyers basically to cough up so that this person can get representation. So is that not a thing in the UK, where the victim of financial abuse can get their lawyer to access their own money from their abuser?
As I say, you can apply for a legal services payment order in those circumstances, but that's an actual application to the court. It's pretty rare to be able to just ask the other side to provide funds. very often people rely on relatives to lend them money, or they'll get a bank loan.
Yeah.
And those debts will be repaid by and large within the process. So the money's going to come back at some point. Of course, there's only one finite pot out of which everything can be paid, which is the family resources. And so that has to be taken into account as well. But very often, abusive people will ensure that their partner just has no access to funds. I saw a lady once who'd been trying to leave her husband for the best part of 20 years, but she just didn't have, as she realised, access to any money at all. And she, in the end, she borrowed some money from her sister, who helped her just kickstart everything. And it went from there. But
we'll have to reach out to their loved ones with both. I just need to qualify what I said before, Karin, too. When I said, that they talk to their lawyers, that it very well could be that they actually have to put an application into court. I was just meaning that they could apply. How that's done, I'm not really sure, but it's probably the same process. I don't really know.
But yes, just so difficult, and it just goes to show that it's not just about having the emotional strength to leave the relationship, but you've got to feel that when you're dipping your toe into this water of litigation, that you are going to be able to fund it, because dealing with it on your own can be really scary. And of course, very often narcissists will represent themselves. I think that's another important point to make. The classic way to identify whether your new client is narcissistic is you're probably solicitor number 4, and they're busy telling you how amazing you are. God, they're
love bombing you. Just I spoke at the Queensland yearly family law conference about this very fact, that around what to look for in victims and abusers and how to tell them apart. And the reason this is so important is because the coercive control strategies they use on the victim, they're going to use the same on you. And before you know it, you're going to be sucked in with this client you wish you could just get rid of, but you're too far gone, so to speak. But they'll love bomb you. I hear that a lot. And you'll be solicitor number 4. Then they'll represent themselves. And all the while, this just extends the domestic violence and extends the victim's misery. It's just
exactly. And of course, can be a misery for the solicitor, because again, if you don't spot this behaviour pattern, you can find yourself representing people who are going to treat you exactly the same way as they treated their partner, because narcissists abuse everybody. It's not confined to
it's
particular.
What good you can do for them. And if you put boundaries, you put a boundary in place. No, I can't do that. Right from the word go. That's when you're more likely to see who they are, because they want to tell you what to do, don't they? They don't want to be controlled by anyone.
No, they want you to put their letters on your notepaper, so you immediately become an extension of their abusive communication. They will want to see you at the crack of dawn in the morning or last thing in the evening. They'll bombard you with emails. They'll expect to be your only client. They're the sort of person who will want to take you out for lunch and for the cost of a pizza get 2 hours free advice. They won't pay your bill. They will denigrate your junior staff. Everything will be your fault and not theirs. So they become the nightmare client. And so I think the importance from the legal profession in terms of spotting this behaviour pattern is not only to support victims of this abusive behaviour, but also to look after yourselves. Lawyer wellbeing is a really big issue in the UK at the moment. Your family lawyers do a pretty hard job in pretty difficult circumstances, deal with a lot of toxic behaviour. And so if you're being, if you're being subjected to that, it's it has an effect on you. And soon you find that you're the victim as well. So spotting it, if people want to act for these kind of individuals and understand what they're dealing with, then fine. But if they don't know what it is, they'll soon find that they're doing more work than they should be doing. They're feeling that they're run ragged. They won't be paid. They're the sort of client who will complain about you at the end of a case. When it goes wrong, it will be your fault.
Yeah.
And so, they are the type of individual that's going to report you to the ombudsman or worse. So
Yes.
Accept that instruction at your own peril, and firmly understanding what it is that you're dealing with is so important.
Yeah, boundaries right from the word go, and document every tiny little thing, because they're going to come back, as you said, and use everything against you. Karin, just a quick question. What I've noticed from my lovely clients who are facing the family court, most of the time there seems to be what they describe as this horrible lawyer that is just as bad as their client. Is that the case, do you think, much of the time? Or is it that lawyer is just being told to, you will write this, you will do this, obviously within the boundaries of the law, or not? Like, what do you think of the fact that my clients are saying their lawyers are just as bad as them?
I think in very few cases, you may find a lawyer who is as bad, because obviously narcissism exists everywhere. I'm sure there are narcissistic lawyers.
Narcissistic counsellors, doctors, lawyers, they're everywhere. They're in every profession. Absolutely.
Exactly. So there will be the occasional, unfortunately, individual that may well be like that. But I think it's much more likely that the lawyer has taken on a client which they don't really understand. They've been love bombed, they've been sucked in, and they become manipulated. And because we have to act in accordance with our clients' instructions, that's our obligation. We give advice that often isn't listened to. And people are allowed to make their own decisions based on that advice. And so you find yourself in this invidious position of having a client who's giving you instructions and requiring you to do things, and will turn on you if you don't do it. Yeah. And that catches you really between a rock and a hard place. So I would say to your clients, don't necessarily assume that the lawyer is as bad. They're probably being subjected to exactly what you experienced during your own relationship.
I do. Knowing that, yes, there are narcissists in every profession. I'm also aware that how a narcissist would be talking to their lawyer like they're something on the bottom of their shoe. You're there to do what I want, and they would treat their lawyer like absolute garbage unless that lawyer is worshipping them, essentially, which of course they're not going to do.
Yeah, or of course you get the other situation where they've been love bombed and they believe it. Because again, if your clients remember when they were first in a relationship with this person, they thought they'd met their soulmate, everything felt amazing. And if the narcissist is clever and holds their lawyer in that position of feeling amazing, this is, believing everything that they're told, because they're very charming, they're very plausible. If you think about the covert narcissist, who's very, very good at playing the victim, and quite possibly will convince their lawyer that actually it's the other person who is the perpetrator. So covert narcissists are very often aligned to somebody that's very successful, because that's how they draw their supply. And they may be able to convince their lawyer that this very successful, amazing person is actually a grandiose narcissist and they are the victim. Yeah. I think when you're the lawyer, the key to that is narcissists have an inability to care about their children. For most separating couples where NPD isn't a factor, the children will always be their point of commonality. Whatever else they're rowing about, they want to do the best for the children. Not so with where one parent is narcissistic. They just want to use the children to their own ends. And if you have a closet narcissistic mother who's playing the victim, the way to call her out will be to look at how she reacts over issues with regard to the children, because she won't put them first, she'll put herself first. Yes. And they will sort of factor in around what it is that she wants. Yeah. And that's really the only way to drill down. So important when you meet with a new client, because you have no idea whether, who they are, what their background is or personality. Really important to spend a lot of time in that first meeting finding out the background to this relationship and asking people a bit about their own background. What was their childhood like? Did their parents separate? Did anything awful happen in the early years of their life? Because narcissists, as you know, are created from their own difficult experiences as they get locked into the body of a tantrumy 4-year-old, really.
Yeah.
And what in one sense, one should feel perhaps a little bit sorry for them, because it's not very nice being in that situation. But of course, what they do emerging from that is even less nice. But it's worth spending the time, not just looking at, okay, the value of the house and what does everybody earn and what's the pension like, but really drilling down into the whole family dynamic and going back a generation and looking at what happened in your client's early years as well, so that you can start to form a view of, okay, what am I dealing with here? Is this person really the victim, or actually are they just pulling the wool over my eyes and they are the abusive element of this relationship? And then, thinking about how you're strategizing your work, but also looking after yourself. And you're so right. When you say no, the boundaries, it's all about setting boundaries. When you're dealing with these people, whether you are the spouse, the partner, the lawyer, or anybody else, you've got to set boundaries that you strictly adhere to, because narcissists push boundaries all the time. It's how they flex their muscles and recognize and ascertain how powerful they might be. By how hard they can push and how much
boundaries. They'll rear their head when you put a boundary in place and tell them, or just say no to them. So, Karin, let's say you've got your client. This client is clearly a victim, and it's gotten to the stage where you're looking at custody. But between the parents, and you now know what who and what their abuser is. What do you do, and how do you support them when this person, the abuser, is not guilty of child abuse in the eyes of the law because it's so covert? And they're going for custody, even though they've probably never had a day of looking after their children in their life. They're going for custody just to punish that parent because they know it's the most important thing in their world, and they want to take and or destroy what means the most to them. What do you do when this parent who is using the children, and it's highly likely that they may get a degree of care, or even 50-50 or more?
I think we need to break that down into sections as to how we look at it. In that, first of all, children have a right to a relationship with both their parents. And that's, I think, a really important thing to bear in mind. That said, when you've been abused by the other parent, you want to protect your children from that abuse. And you rightly say, Nova, that for most people in this situation, the children are the most important people in their lives, and they want to protect them from that future abuse. The courts are they're getting better, but they're not great at spotting behaviour patterns. And also, there's a huge desire on the part of the non-narcissistic parent to protect the children. And that can easily turn into a danger that they might be accused of parental alienation, which is another very buzzy word at the moment. Because, to be honest, parental alienation and domestic violence are the opposite sides of the same coin. And people use the allegation of parental alienation as a shield to a domestic violence allegation, and the other way around. It's really important to think about what is achievable as opposed to what is desirable. So I've said that children have the right to have a relationship with both parents. I think it's very important that you allow the children to recognize what each parent is like, and to hope that by providing them with unconditional love, security, stability, okay, you might become sort of bad parent in that you are the one who's requiring homework to be done, setting boundaries, where the other parent is, oh no, you stay up as long as you like, and do this and have that.
The fun Disneyland parent.
Exactly. But sometimes narcissists thrive at being Disney parents. So they love showing the outside world what a great parent they are. So it's all about great holidays and doing fabulous things. It's all very external. They are useless at making sure you do your spellings and all the day and washing and ironing, all the day-to-day stuff. Yeah. But actually, one of the things that I think is quite dangerous for parents is if you try to keep the children away, there are two things. One, children become curious. Two, back to this love bombing. Parents are very good at love bombing children in exactly the same way that they love bombed the other parent, and appearing to be the victim. You know, mom or dad won't let me see you. I want to do all this stuff with you, and I'm being stopped from doing that. And when you're dealing with a young, impressionable child who doesn't yet have the emotional maturity to recognize what's happening, that can be quite dangerous. Also, if you do really restrict the time that the narcissistic parent spends with the children to sort of almost nothing, there's a danger that as soon as the children are out of the jurisdiction of the court, so in the UK once they hit 16, that narcissistic parent swoops in when the other parent has no control at all and lures them away. So he says, come and live with me. I'm going to pay for you to go to university. I'm going to take you around the world. And that can be very attractive, especially if the parent with whom you've been permanently residing has had limited funds, so has really been managing on a shoestring budget, can't do all these fancy things. And what you don't want as a parent is for your child to be lured off when they are in their mid to late teens and you can do nothing about it. So it really is about balance. And yes, of course, you want to protect your child. Narcissists are not really that interested in spending a lot of time with their children. They just want the showy side of it. Sometimes it feels massively unfair if you can't, if you can afford a sort of leaky caravan somewhere in the summer holidays and this other parent wants to take them on safari to Kenya or something. But if you sit back for a moment and think, okay, will the children enjoy this? Is this going to allow their narcissistic parent to be in their best light for this trip, whatever it might be? Is it going to give the children a chance to see what they're really like, expose them to this? They'll get something out of it. So do I really want to try and stop it? Should I let them spend some time with them? Because what I think as the non-narcissistic parent you really want to try to achieve is for your children to recognize the difference. And it's hard to recognize the difference if you don't live through it. So I think there are different schools of thought about this. And I know that some people will say, try and keep the children away from the narcissistic parent as much as you possibly can. But personally, from my perspective, I don't think it's that all or nothing that you want to achieve. I think you want to allow the children to have two parents, recognize what they're like, minimize the exposure, obviously keep a handle on the abuse and be aware of it. But what you need to be teaching your children is their ability to recognize it. Because, of course, worse still, there's a real danger that the children of narcissists are attracted to narcissistic partners in their own adult life because it feels normal.
It's familiar, and it feels safe. Isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And so you're trying to protect them from that as well. So it's a really big issue. It's not just about mom or dad is abusive. I want to keep the children, protect them, keep them safe. It's about a real learning curve for the children. Who are my two parents? What do I get from each of them? What do I need to recognize? What do I need to know that I avoid in my own future relationships.
Yeah. It is the learning curve, I think, and there is no perfect answer because teenagers are teenagers sometimes are selfish. They're very they're all about themselves a lot of the time because that's just the age. It's they're thinking about and very short-sighted in terms of what's going on the next day. And it can be, wow, the grass is greener over there. And, at that developmental stage, that it's easy for them to be lured over. And without overt child abuse, it's got to be virtually impossible for them not to be, in the company of that toxic parent. So I think it's about coming to terms with that, obviously keeping your handle on over child abuse, but making sure, as I say in Fake Love, that your home is the absolute stark contrast, that where you role model empathy and there's rules and boundaries. And yes, they're going to get better presents because that narcissistic parent has hidden all the money and is not paying enough child support. But they're not going to have to walk on eggshells in your home. And children don't want a perfect parent. They want a happy one. And if you're continually worried about them being gaslighted, which is going to happen, there's nothing you can do about it. Narcissist is going to do what a narcissist is going to do. But if you're continually focused on that, you can't be that happy parent that you want to be. You're always going to be pouring from, an empty cup or trying to.
Yeah, and I think it's that point that we said earlier, narcissists never change and they treat everybody the same. Yeah. So this behaviour pattern is going to be demonstrated to the children just as it was to you, to the lawyer, everybody else. And so it's back to it being so important to recognise the behaviour pattern. Yeah. And also to think about picking battles, because you talked about post-separation abuse, and narcissists need narcissistic supply constantly. So they may have left you for a new relationship. That's almost certainly going to go wrong at some point. But they'll come back. They keep people. It's a little bit like spiders keeping flies in spiders' webs in a little row.
You'll keep for later. I'll come back and snack on you when I'm ready. When I'm bored with this one, I'm full.
Exactly that. And so when they're low on supply, and if you have children, they may well come back to rattle your cage over something or other. And the classic one is narcissists never bring children back after contact visits on time, ever. It's always early or late. And of course, again, people who've been subjected to traumatic relationships and have this inherent sense of fairness and may have a court order that says the children should be back at 6:30 on Sunday, want to understand why that can't be enforced. Well, point one, narcissists don't adhere to rules. They don't set boundaries. They want to pick fights. They want to cause chaos, and that's why they do it. Going back to the point that the only thing that you can change is your reaction, rather than saying, well, where on earth have you been? And I've been worried sick. And if you just say, oh, well, the traffic must have been bad, never mind, goodbye, and really downplay it. Don't go back to your lawyer and say, I want you to write to them to say they've broken the order, they weren't here at the right time. Because all that's going to do is cause expense and drama and a further hiatus that is exactly what the narcissist wants. Whereas if it's a battle that you probably can't do very much about, because even if you get another order, they're still not going to adhere to that. Yeah. If you show them you don't care and you're not rising to this and you're not being provoked, it's not giving them supply, and they're going to have to go and find one of the other flies wrapped up in spider's web to reopen and cause them a problem.
Yeah, exactly. I always advise my clients to talk to their lawyer about when getting orders in place where they don't have to see their abuser, and striving for, pickups and drop-offs from schools, kindies, looking at school holidays, leaving no stone unturned. And then it's only going to be between, that narcissist and their children if they're late. And of course, then you're not being intimidated and triggered by your abuser at pickups and drop-offs.
Absolutely. So ideally, you want to create a child arrangements plan which absolutely minimises contact.
Yeah.
I think another point is that victims of narcissistic abuse often feel that they have to justify themselves. So when they're bombarded with vitriolic correspondence and very critical correspondence, they feel that they've got to reply and say, no, this isn't right. You don't have to do any of that. Clients have a belief that whatever is written down, and of course we live in this horrible email world where everybody communicates in writing now, that if it's wrong, you've got to prove your position and show that they're lying. It really doesn't matter. And what I would say is never rise to that. If you have some kind of communication from narcissistic other parent, read it really carefully. Never knee-jerk into an instant reply. Think about it and analyse, what do you need to respond to? So if the only bit that you need to reply to is little Joey will have his rugby boots at such and such place by just say so. Rugby boots will be in bag, full stop. Yeah. The other 5 paragraphs that may be dealing with you did this, you said that. Yeah. So what? Yeah. It doesn't matter. Just because they put it in writing doesn't mean it's on record somewhere or somebody's going to believe it. Yeah. And I think pulling away from that desire to justify your own position and to recognise you don't need to do that is where, again, having therapeutic support and having the strength to only deal with what you have to is so important. Yeah. And that happens much more often post-separation, once the lawyers are out of the way and the abuser rises up again and starts bombarding with correspondence.
Yeah. Once again, it's about boundaries, isn't it? You want to be so boring by not rising to the occasion that there's just no point. It takes too much energy and they're getting nothing from it. So, things like parenting apps, I always recommend my clients to use or talk to your lawyer about getting that, because then everything, if they want to abuse you, it's going to be documented, and it may also act as a deterrent to stop them abusing you. But by the same token, only responding to urgent matters and no emotion. They want your emotion. It's their fuel. So sometimes it's so hard when you hear just a blatant lie, but that's gaslighting, and they are baiting you because they thrive off you defending yourself and explaining why you're right. They already know you're right. They just want you to go crazy trying to prove it. That's where they get their supply from. So, Karin, just quickly again, please tell all our listeners, just give them a brief rundown of exactly what they should, or just some kind of a template around what they should be doing when they've been discarded by the narcissist, they share children, and they need to work out custody, get a property settlement, and maybe the narcissist's got a new partner already. That's highly likely. What should they do? What are the steps?
Okay, so I think the first step is to look after yourself. Get yourself ready to deal with this. And I think that really does involve going to see somebody like yourself to recognise what you're dealing with, what you've been living through, and to enable you to gain the confidence and the strength for what will be quite a difficult battle ahead. And, as with everything, preparation is everything. You can't deal with anything in life if you're not prepared. So your first step is to think about you and putting yourself in a frame of mind and an emotional state where you can face what lies ahead of you. I think you then need to instruct a lawyer that you are able to share your concerns with, and that you feel properly understands what you've been going through, and also properly understands the need to set boundaries, recognises the behaviour pattern, knows what they're dealing with as well as what you're dealing with as a client, and can give you that support to move forwards.
I want to reiterate that, Karen. It is so important to get a lawyer, but not just any lawyer. It's got to be someone you connect with, and also it's got to be someone who you can see and feel understands this type of abuse and what you're going through, and can support you with that.
And, recommendations are a very good way to find the right person to do that. Yes. But also, if you've met with a lawyer and you think, actually, no, this isn't the right person, don't be afraid to just terminate the retainer and find the right person, because carrying on with the wrong person can be a recipe for disaster. And nobody minds. Clients change lawyer, may have an initial meeting with someone and then meet someone else. In London, it's very often for clients, especially top-end clients, to go through beauty parades of lawyers. So nobody minds if you say, actually, it was great to have a consultation with you, but I just don't. I think I'd be better speaking to someone else. So never be afraid to do that. And again, people who've been the victims of abuse are generally pretty low on self-confidence and feel a bit nervous of saying, actually, I got this wrong. You're the wrong person for me. So don't be afraid of that. Make sure that you find the right person, and you'll recognize the right person, because they'll absolutely understand what you've been going through. And they'll be able to point you in the right direction for other support professionals. Like perhaps you need a financial advisor that's going to help you understand the finances that you've never known anything about. Perhaps you need a divorce coach, somebody who's going to be there to support you on the emotional side, because lawyers are too expensive to do that, and they don't have the right level of qualification. So it's about building a team. Also, not being scared about the cost of that, because actually having the right people to do the right job is going to minimize the overall cost long term. It's when you've got the wrong person that your bill is going to go through the roof. So you might think, oh God, I've got a lawyer, I don't think I want all these other people involved. But actually, using the collaborative model, building a team of the right individuals around you is very, very cost efficient. So again, don't be afraid of that. It's about, it's like if you're cooking, you're going to use the right saucepan for the right part of the meal. It's exactly the same thing. Or fixing a car, to use the male analogy, you use the right tool to do the job. So don't be afraid of that. Think hard about whether you really want the children not to spend time with the other parent, and whether what you actually want to do is, as you rightly referred to your book, that excellent chapter about your home is security and stability. Focusing on you and what you bring to the party is actually much more important than worrying about what's going on the other side of the equation. And by doing that, you will enable, hopefully, the children to see the difference. And that's what you're trying to do for them, both during the context of the divorce and for them in later life, when they're making their own choices about their own relationships. Don't be rushed into anything. Take it at your pace. Nobody else needs to control the agenda here. Your lawyer will ensure that it runs at a pace that you're able to cope with. Don't feel that you've got to be railroaded into doing something that you don't want to do more quickly than you want to do it. You are entitled to take advice, to do this in a timely way, because you only get one go at this and you need to get it right. So don't be rushed into anything. Remember that you are in control of your own destiny. That's why it's so important right at the outset to talk to somebody who can just ground you again and make you realize the difference between right and wrong, and the difference between gaslighting and projecting and manipulation and all those, a word salad and all those other things, so that you're really anchored to what you're going to do. And then it's about the distinction between desirable and achievable. You need to focus on what's achievable.
What you can control versus what you can't control.
Exactly. And what you can do nothing about, don't bother to try.
Yeah.
It's really about thinking about your boundaries, thinking about where do I want to be in, say, 6 months or a year's time? How am I most likely to get there cost efficiently? Making sure that you stay this grey rock, very, very boring person. Remembering that the only thing that you can change is your reaction, not the other person's behaviour. Nothing and no one is ever going to change that. Not the court, nobody else. All you can change is you. And if you remove that desire to react, people who've been in an abusive, traumatic relationship become catastrophized. Everything in their mind is a disaster. And again, somebody from the counselling side of life is going to help them deal with that and decatastrophize things that go on in their life so that they can have a much smoother, calmer approach to everything. And that will enormously help them not to react and to focus on, as I said earlier, when you get a letter, be it from your other half or the lawyer they've instructed to just be their mouthpiece, which feels like they're as bad as your abuser, think about it really carefully, read it through 10 times and highlight the bits that are really important and relevant. It will probably be about 10% of the communication. And only deal with that. And just don't worry about anything else at all, because there's no need to. Don't feel that you've got to defend yourself. You haven't. You can be true to yourself. You can know that you're right. And that self-knowledge and self-belief is what is so important. You're never going to persuade your abuser that you're right. So there's no point even trying. And don't be afraid that their bombarding communications are going to find their way into a court bundle, because they won't. And to remember that you will always have your opportunity to put your side of a case when it becomes necessary to do so. You don't have to do it as you go along on a day-to-day basis. Remember that they will need to win, and factor in the ability to do that, because you're much more likely to get out of this more quickly, more cost efficiently, and with your entitlement at its highest level if you play them at their own game. And as you said earlier, Nova, it's about turning into the manipulator and really playing them at their own game so that you achieve what you want. I think it's important also to remember that this behaviour will never stop. So post-separation abuse is a very, very real thing. And the only way that you can stop that is to be very, very dull. So that when they move on and they look to come back, which they will, and again, you need to be strong, that you're not hoovered back, that you don't at a weak moment succumb to that love bombing at its highest level, because it probably will happen again, especially if you've got children. Because if you have no children, you can go your separate ways, never lay eyes on this person again, but much, much more difficult when you have children. So they will come back. And I think it's really important then to just remember it's only you that you can change. So you have to be something different. You have to be something that's not attractive to them in any way and gives them no supply. And if they get nothing back from you, if you don't rise to their provocation, if you don't fall for their charm, if you don't have a weak moment at any stage, they will look somewhere else, because you're of no value to them at all.
That's right.
So I think in terms of steps, that's the best way that I could describe what you have to go through. And I think boundaries, I couldn't underline that enough. And also battles. Only engage in a battle that you have a very good chance of winning. If it's a futile battle, let it go. And it's not weakness to let it go. Actually, it's enormous strength, because sometimes you feel, oh, I'm just letting them have their own way, and how does that work? But it becomes boring. I'll tell you very quickly, I had a client, her husband had moved in with somebody else, and they had older children, and one of these older children had passed their driving test. And so Dad said, "Oh, our little 6-year-old is now going to be driven around by my step brother who's just turned 17 and can drive." And his mum was absolutely horrified, and wanted to do something to stop this.
Yeah.
And I said to her, "Actually, the 17-year-old is probably quite a good driver. Dad is doing this because he wants to generate this alarm.
Yeah.
And what exactly are you going to do about it? Will a court grant you a specific issue order to say that your child can't be driven around by a totally competent person who's passed their driving test?
Yeah.
But if you do nothing and say nothing, it will probably go away." And that was exactly what happened. There was no driving. It was all done just to cause this harm and drama.
Narcissist was looking for a rise, and the narcissist knew that mum would be like so worried about that, and that's why provided her with that evidence. It wasn't to give her the heads up to be polite. It was because he knew it would get a rise out of her. So no reactions, guys. Okay, Karin, look, I just want to say such a big thank you to you for all of that information. You have been just wonderful, and it is so nice to know that there are family lawyers out there who are experienced in supporting, who are so knowledgeable in supporting victims of narcissistic abuse. So, if you're in the UK, please look up Karin in Surrey, I believe. Is Surrey? Woking?
Yes. Yeah.
Woking. I was wondering if I was pronouncing that correctly.
Yes.
And it is. I can't stress how important it is to. It's like counsellors. Some counselling is not always better than no counselling. You go to the wrong counsellor that you don't feel comfortable with, who really is not experienced in narcissistic abuse, you're not going to get the right support. And that might be lovely, but you're not going to get the right support. And the same applies to lawyers. It's such an important, crucial time for you when you feel the absolute worst in your life and you've got to make the biggest decisions. So please find someone like Karin in your part of the world so that you are supported to get through this battle as unscathed as possible. So Karin, thank you very much, and please look at Karin's books too. She's got how many books have you written?
2 on my own, and I've co-written 2, and I'm writing another one at the moment, but just finding the time to do it. But can I thank you so much, Nova, for inviting me, and also to say, first of all, your book Fake Love is amazing, and I recommend it all the time, but also to make the point that in terms of counsellor, it's so important to find somebody that really gets it, because you can spend a lot of money with the wrong person and actually not have the support. And I think since COVID and lockdown, the world became a much smaller place, and things can be done remotely in a way that they just weren't 10 years ago, and so you're not confined to a counsellor from your own part of the world at all.
I counsel people all over the world, in the UK, Canada, the US, New Zealand, everywhere. So you're so right. It's become smaller, we've become more connected, and that means you can find the right support. You've just got to look for it, and word of mouth is the best recommendation you can have. Definitely. Okay, thank you. Karin, thank you once again. And no doubt I'll be talking to you in the near future again. Thank you.
I hope so. Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of another episode of Fake Love and Flying Monkeys. I really hope you enjoyed this discussion with Karin Walker, who is a recognized leader in her field. She's an amazing lawyer in the UK, and I really enjoyed talking to a lawyer who clearly gets it and knows what it's like for victims to experience this type of abuse and how scary it is to walk into a lawyer's office and give them that trust. And Karin is certainly someone who not only has all the professional knowledge and experience, but will make you as her client just feel so welcome, and of course instill in you that deep trust. Finding the right lawyer is incredibly important, and Karin is the person to go and see. Okay, on that note, guys, please don't forget to subscribe to all my other social media platforms, and if you'd like to have a one-on-one session with me, just look at my website link below, and I'd love to be able to support you. And of course, don't forget to get your copy of my best-selling book, Fake Love: Understanding and Healing from Narcissistic Abuse. Until the next episode, remember, you are worthy of love, and you are worthy of so much more than a lifetime of fake love and flying monkeys.